As has been said these last days, we've been exploring the mysteries that are hidden in plain sight until we no longer need the light of existence. We no longer need the abilities of mind, the perceptions, the sensory awareness. And it's also been suggested that could it be, is it possible that we ourselves are the personification of these mysteries hidden in plain sight? So we're exploring with the stories these mysteries. But first, there's an old anecdote about a great Sufi Master who was just about to conduct a meeting in his house when there was a knock at the door, and when he opened it, outside was standing a young boy who prostrated himself in front of the master, begging to be allowed to enter, to learn from him. But without speaking a word, the Sufi Master took his staff and beat the young boy to pulp on his threshold. He closed the door and entered and went about his lesson. And after the lesson, he opened the door and said, "What is this pile of bloodied flesh doing on my doorstep?" And in that instant, the Sufi Master brought the young boy to wholeness. And then there's a personal anecdote. Several years ago, when the Paris riots were occurring, there was a visit from a lovely French man who was visiting Cannes at the time, and he came to several of our meditations, but we did not speak until one day he came over to me and he said, "I'm afraid tomorrow I have to go back to Paris, and I've been a policeman for 32 years, and I'm afraid that when I go back I will have to kill somebody." So I looked at him and said, "What are you talking about? I kill somebody every day." And a big smile came on his face. He knew exactly what was being said. And so there's a story. There's a story about an old woman, an ancient crone, and the devil. And it so happened that they were traveling along the same road at the same time, so they got into conversation. But they actually got into an argument about who was the most clever. And it got quite heated after some while, as you can imagine. But it was decided that the only way it could be proved was for each of them to demonstrate their abilities. So they headed for town. And when they arrived there, the devil led the old crone to the local butcher's shop. And when they were in the butcher's, a buyer came in to buy meat. And of course, the devil, invisible to the shopkeeper, the butcher, and others, entered into the buyer, who, after the meat was wrapped up, said to the butcher, "You've shortchanged me. The meat weighs less than what I've paid for, And so, of course, the butcher said, "How dare you accuse me of being false in my weights?" And so they got into a very, very heated argument, after which the butcher took his cleaver and clove the buyer in two. Well, of course, after this came the authorities and hauled away to the butcher to jail. And of course the devil, gloating, said, "Well, you see how powerful I am. I've killed somebody and sent somebody off to a lifetime in jail." "Oh," said the old crone, "all right, well, now it's my turn." So she led him to the draper's shop, the cloth merchant. And when they went inside the shop, she said, with a sad look on her face, "I have to buy some cloth. I don't like to do so, but my son forces me to do so. He has a mistress, and he has me buy gifts for his mistress. And so I'm here to buy some cloth as a gift for her." Well, of course, the cloth merchant was very, very sympathetic, and he said, "Well, may Allah assuage your suffering and make your son pay for his evils." And he brought out a nice piece of yellow silk, which the old lady paid for and left the shop with the devil in tow, of course, invisible. And she headed straight for the house of the draper, the cloth merchant. And she knocked on the door. And when the door was opened by the woman of the house, the old hag said, it has come to the time of prayer, and I'm a little lost, and I wonder if you will allow me to make my prayer in your house." Well, the woman of the house was very hospitable and have invited her in and gave her a little prayer carpet and set her up in the chamber so that she could make her prayers. But the old woman, while she was there, very carefully put the piece of cloth on the bed so it could well be seen. And after the time of prayer, she thanked the woman of the house and left. Well, of course, when the cloth seller came home and went to his chamber, there he saw on his bed a piece of cloth that he immediately recognized as having been sold to the old woman. So he straightway went downstairs and beat the living daylights out of his wife and sent her packing off to her parents. Now, of course, the devil said to the old woman, "Yeah, well, that was pretty clever." And the old woman said, "Well, I'm not done yet." And so after this, the old hag went back to the cloth merchant's shop, and she said with tears in her, "I'm so sorry. I'm not familiar with this place, and so yesterday with my package I knocked at a door, and a very kind woman let me in to take the time of prayer, and I left my parcel there, and I don't know where it is." Well, of course, the cloth merchant immediately knew what had happened, and he said to the old woman under his breath with some shock, "That was my house." And then he went to the back room and brought out the piece of cloth, and of course he gave it to the old woman, who thanked him greatly. But of course the cloth merchant couldn't wait to usher her out of the shop so that he could immediately rush off to his his in-laws' house and gather up his beloved wife with great apologies and take her back to their house. So the devil and the old woman, in making a summation of who was the more clever, the old woman, the old crone, said to the devil, "You see, you must." What is it we've discovered about this place of seeing, where there is no need for sensory awareness? What is it we're discovering about this mystery, claiming it for ourselves, coming to know it, the workings of it, without machinations of mind? What is it about existence for us now? How would we end this story? You see, we must. What is it about your encounters now? Every encounter, every experience, every meeting. What do these stories tell us? How would we end this story?